Today, we're going to be in the book of Daniel, chapter 3. It's the story of King Nebuchadnezzar and the three men in the fiery furnace. So, a little background information. King Nebuchadnezzar is known as one of the strongest military leaders in all of history. He ruled over the city of Babylon from about 605 BC after his father died to about 562 BC. His men were known as being violent and aggressive. The Babylonian Empire is known as one of the greatest empires of all time. So the story starts out with King Nebuchadnezzar building this giant statue. It was this giant golden statue, and he says, you have to fall on your knees and worship this now. You don't worship any other god. You worship me, and you worship this statue. But there's these three men. I'm sure you've heard of them. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They all say, we're not going to worship this statue. We're going to worship our God and not follow your rules. So these three men are brought to King Nebuchadnezzar. And he says, I'll give you one more chance to worship my statue, or else you'll be thrown in the fiery furnace. Anyone who didn't worship this golden statue was thrown in the fiery furnace. The furnace was so hot, it would kill the soldiers as they would bring the prisoners to the fire. So he says, I'll give you one more chance. And the three men say, no, we're not going to worship your God. We're not going to worship your statue. And they say, God will save us, but even if he doesn't, we will not fall down and worship to your statue. I want to highlight that verse right there. It's verse 16 in Daniel 3. But even if. See, these three men knew they're going to die. You know, they're not worshiping the statue, and they're going to die. So rather than sparing their lives and saying, I'll worship the statue, and God knows, I'm still with him, but just so I can save my life, I'm going to worship this statue so I don't die. And I'm sure that's what a lot of people would do. You know, if I was in this situation, I don't know which route I would have taken, I like to think I would have taken this route, of the but even if route, but I don't know if I would have, to be honest. So King Nebuchadnezzar he's so mad. He gets so hot, and he says, all right, crank the fire up 7 times hotter. So now it's about 7 times hotter than what it usually was. I couldn't find the exact degrees, and this is probably wrong, but Google told me it's 12,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know about any science people out there. You can tell me if that's right or not. Somebody told me it's hotter than the sun, so that might be a stretch. But it was hot. That's the point. The fire was hot. So these three men are brought to the fire. The soldiers died as they threw these three men in the fire. And as they're standing in the fire, burning alive, King Nebuchadnezzar looks in the fire and he jumps up. He says, look, I see a fourth man. And he looks like a son of God. This was Old Testament. This was before Jesus. So the Son of God had not been shown to the people. Nobody knew what he looked like. So he says, quick, get these men out of the fire. He tells them, come out of the fire now. And he falls down and worships. He says, I want to worship your God now. King Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, I will worship your God now. We're going to get rid of the statue. I think this is one of the best stories in the whole Bible. Okay, you might think, Jesus just came to save these three people in the fire. but it has such a deeper meaning than that. Do you have a but even if statement? Are you gonna go through a tough time and be here, okay, away from God? Or are you gonna stay here and say, but even if, you know? Are you gonna break up with a girlfriend, not get into a college, get fired, lose a loved one, but are you gonna go over here away from God, or are you gonna stay and say, but even if? So I want to ask you 2 questions before we end. Who's your fourth person? And what's your fire? Is your fire worth leaving God? I can tell you it's not. And if you're in that fire, is that fourth person God? Because if that fourth person isn't Jesus, I don't know if you can get out of that fire.